Jake Morrison stood by the big window of Lunar Base Alpha and looked at Earth spinning slowly in the dark space. The emergency meeting had just ended and humanity's first meeting with aliens had gone very badly. 3 days ago, huge crystal ships appeared at the edge of the solar system and sent a message that scared every world leader. The Galaxy Council was a group of 17 different alien species, and they had given humanity a choice through their speaker. The speaker was a tall, bug-like creature called High Arbiter Zexthal. "Your species has been watched," the machine that translated the aliens' clicking sounds into English said in a cold voice. "You make war and use up resources without caring, and you attack your own people. The Galaxy Council thinks humanity is dangerous to peace in the galaxy. You have 30 Earth days to give up your weapons and break apart your armies and let the Council watch over you. If you do not do this, we will destroy your planet." Admiral Kate Sullivan had been there when the aliens sent their first message. Her old face showed no feelings as she listened. Now she stood next to Morrison in the Moonbase Command Center looking at screens that showed where the alien ships were. "How many ships?" Morrison asked, even though he knew the answer would be bad. 47 ships that we can see," said Lieutenant Commander Ryan Torres from his workstation. "Each one is about as big as our biggest aircraft carriers, but they have energy readings that are much stronger than anything our fleet has." Dr. Lisa Hayes was a scientist who studied alien life, and she had been quickly brought to the first contact team. She shook her head as she looked at the information about alien culture that they had gotten from the alien messages. "They are not completely wrong about us," she said quietly. "Humans do have a history of fighting, but they are judging us based on information that is not complete." Admiral Sullivan turned away from the battle screen, and her jaw was tight with determination. "Maybe we are violent compared to their standards. Maybe we do fight each other. But we are also the species that stopped a world war so we could work together when asteroids threatened our planet. We are the species that chose to explore space instead of just mining our own world until nothing was left." Morrison nodded as he remembered the great cooperation of 2157, when countries that used to be enemies worked together to build the first permanent moon colonies. "What is our answer going to be, Admiral?" Sullivan's smile was sharp like a knife. "We are going to show them exactly why they should have studied humanity longer before making threats." The alien fleet waited at the edge of the solar system like giant crystal mountains floating in space. Each ship was smooth and reflected light in strange ways that hurt human eyes to look at directly. The ships did not move in normal ways but seemed to slide through space without any visible engines or thrusters. On Earth, every government was meeting in emergency sessions. The news channel showed the same pictures over and over of the alien ships that telescopes had captured. People filled the streets in some cities while others stayed locked in their homes. Religious leaders said this was either the end times or a test from God. Scientists worked day and night trying to understand the alien technology. Morrison had been a ship captain for 15 years before being assigned to lunar operations. He had seen combat during the Mars mining wars and the asteroid belt conflicts, but nothing had prepared him for this. Fighting other humans was one thing, but facing aliens with technology far beyond anything Earth had was completely different. "The alien ships are not moving closer," reported Torres as he watched his instruments. "They seem to be waiting for our answer." Dr. Hayes was typing quickly on her computer as she analyzed more data from the alien transmissions. "I have been studying their language patterns and cultural references. The Galaxy Council has done this before to other species. They call it correction. They find a species they think is dangerous and either make them surrender or destroy them completely." "How many species have they corrected?" asked Sullivan. "At least 12 that I can find references to in their transmissions. All of them either gave up their weapons and became part of the Council's empire or were wiped out completely." Morrison felt a cold feeling in his stomach. What happened to the ones that surrendered? They became worker species. They mine resources and build things for the Council, but they have no freedom and no weapons and no right to make their own choices. They exist, but they do not really live. Sullivan walked to another screen that showed Earth's military forces. Ships and bases and weapons that had seemed powerful just a week ago now looked like toys compared to the alien fleet. What do our military experts think about fighting them? General Brooks ran computer simulations, said Torres. Even if we used every nuclear weapon on Earth and every ship in our fleet, the best case scenario is that we might damage 2 or 3 of their ships before they destroy us completely. The room was quiet for a long moment as everyone thought about what that meant. 47 alien ships against all of Earth's defenses, and Earth would lose badly. The technology gap was just too big. There has to be another way, said Morrison. Humans have always found ways to win fights even when the enemy was stronger. Dr. Hayes looked up from her computer with an expression that was part fear and part excitement. There might be something. I have been studying how the Galaxy Council thinks about warfare and politics. They are very old and very set in their ways. They have been the strongest power in the galaxy for thousands of years. What does that mean for us? Asked Sullivan. It means they expect certain responses. They expect species to either surrender immediately or attack them with conventional weapons. They have never encountered a species that responded in a completely different way. Morrison began to understand what she was suggesting. You mean we do something they are not expecting? Exactly. The Council has correction protocols that they follow every time. Show overwhelming force, then demand surrender, then either occupy or destroy. It works because every species responds the same way. Sullivan's eyes began to show interest. But if we respond in a way they have never seen before, then their protocols do not work, and they have to think of something new. And thinking of something new takes time we can use. Torres was listening to communications from Earth. Admiral, the President is calling for you. The Emergency Assembly is meeting and they want military recommendations. Sullivan straightened her uniform and prepared to leave. Morrison, you and Hayes keep working on this idea about unexpected responses. Torres, monitor the alien fleet and let me know if anything changes. As the Admiral left, Morrison looked back out at Earth hanging in space. Somewhere down there, billions of people were waiting to see if humanity would fight or surrender or find some third option that no one had thought of yet. What kind of unexpected response could possibly work against ships like that? He wondered out loud. Dr. Hayes smiled for the first time since the aliens had arrived. The kind that only humans would think of. President Henry Collins stood in front of the emergency meeting of the United Earth Assembly where representatives from every nation had gathered in the Geneva complex. The future of humanity depended on the decisions made in this room. Fellow representatives, Collins began, and his voice carried clearly through the huge chamber. We face a choice that will decide not just our generation but all generations to come. Do we give up our freedom to alien rulers who judge us without understanding us, or do we show them what humanity really means? The argument that followed was intense. Some delegates, led by Minister Elena Vasquez of the European Federation, wanted to give in to the aliens. We cannot win against such powerful forces, she begged. Maybe under their guidance we can prove our worth and earn independence slowly. But Admiral Sullivan, who was called to speak to the assembly, painted a different picture. I have spent 40 years in Earth's defense forces, she said, standing straight at the podium. I have seen humanity at its worst and its best. Yes, we fight. Yes, we argue. But when faced with being wiped out, we do not surrender. We adapt, we overcome, we find a way. Commander Alex Parker had recently returned from the Mars colonies, and he provided important information. The alien fleet is powerful, but they are positioned for defense. They expect us to either surrender or launch a desperate normal attack. They do not understand human battle thinking. Dr. Hayes had been working without sleep with her team, studying every piece of information about Galaxy Council warfare patterns. Their previous corrections of species followed a pattern you could predict, she reported. Overwhelming show of force, then demand for surrender, then either occupation or complete destruction. They have never met serious resistance. Morrison, who was now promoted to Strategic Operations Coordinator, showed humanity's response plan. Operation Odyssey, he announced to the quiet assembly. We are not going to fight them the way they expect. We are going to fight them the human way. The plan was bold in its simplicity. While the alien fleet waited at the system's edge for humanity's surrender, Earth's combined military forces would launch what looked like a normal defensive response. But hidden within that response would be humanity's true message to the galaxy. We have changed every long-range missile in our arsenal, explained General Patricia Brooks, who was head of the newly formed Unified Defense Command. Not with nuclear warheads, but with something far more dangerous to their way of thinking: information. The idea had come from Dr. Hayes during one of the long planning sessions. She had been studying the Galaxy Council's history and noticed something important. Every species they have corrected was judged based on incomplete data, she had explained. They look at a species for a short time, see conflict and violence, and decide that species is dangerous. They never wait to see the full picture. Morrison had built on that idea. What if we show them the full picture all at once? Not just our wars, but why we fought them. Not just our violence, but what we learned from it. Not just our mistakes, but how we fixed them. The plan required every nation on Earth to work together in ways that had never been done before. Factories that used to make cars were now making missile components. Scientists who used to compete were now sharing research. Military forces that had been enemies were now training together. General Brooks had been skeptical at first. You want to load our missiles with history lessons instead of explosives, she had said. How is that supposed to stop an invasion fleet? Because, Dr. Hayes had replied, the Galaxy Council's greatest weakness is that they think they already know everything about us. If we can prove they are wrong about humanity, then their entire justification for destroying us falls apart. The technical challenges were enormous. Each missile had to carry massive amounts of data compressed into formats the aliens could read. The information had to be translated into mathematical concepts that any intelligent species could understand. Most importantly, it had to tell the complete story of humanity, not just the parts that made them look bad. Commander Parker had suggested including real-time communications from human settlements across the solar system. Let them hear our children singing, he said. Let them see families working together. Let them watch former enemies building things side by side. Over the next 24 hours, as the Galaxy Council's deadline got closer, Earth's factories worked harder than ever before. Every nation gave resources and every space facility prepared for launch. Every human citizen held their breath as their representatives chose to fight back. Instead of give up, the alien fleet remained motionless at the edge of the solar system. Long-range sensors showed they were scanning Earth constantly, but they made no move to come closer. High Arbiter Zexthal was clearly waiting for humanity's surrender. Signal from the Council flagship, reported Communications Officer Maria Santos from the command bunker. They are asking if we have made our decision. President Collins had authorized Admiral Sullivan to speak for all of humanity. Tell them, she said calmly, that our decision will be delivered shortly. Tell them to watch carefully because they are about to learn something new. The countdown began broadcasting on every communication channel on Earth and in every human settlement from Luna Base to the mining stations in the asteroid belt. Children in schools stopped their lessons to listen. Workers in factories paused their assembly lines. Soldiers in bases around the world checked their equipment one final time. Hayes stood in the main control room watching displays that showed the status of thousands of missiles. Each one carried a piece of humanity's story compressed into data formats that alien computers could process. The complete history of human civilization, from cave paintings to space colonies, was loaded into those warheads. This is either the most brilliant military strategy in human history, said Morrison, or the most expensive suicide note ever written. Maybe both, replied Sullivan. But at least when we are gone, the galaxy will know who we really were instead of who they thought we were. The final minutes ticked away, and Earth held its breath. 47 alien ships waited in the darkness while thousands of human missiles prepared to launch. But these missiles carried something no alien species had ever sent in response to a threat. They carried the truth about what it meant to be human. "Launch authorization confirmed," announced General Brooks. "All stations report ready?" Admiral Sullivan looked around the command center at the faces of people from every nation on Earth working together to save their species. "Begin Operation Odyssey," she ordered. "Show them what humanity really is." The countdown echoed across every major city on Earth and was transmitted at the same time to Luna Base and Mars, Colony, and the research stations scattered throughout the asteroid belt. With 18 hours left until the Galaxy Council's deadline, humanity's response began. Commander Sarah Mitchell watched from the bridge of the UES Defiance, which was Earth's newest and most advanced destroyer, as launch signatures appeared on her tactical display. From Earth's surface and from orbital platforms and from hidden installations on the Moon, thousands of missiles streaked toward the alien fleet. "First wave away," reported Captain Danny Roberts from Launch Control Houston. "Second wave starting in 3 minutes." Admiral Sullivan watched the operation from the Strategic Command bunker deep beneath Geneva, surrounded by holographic displays showing the real-time positions of both human and alien forces. "Signal from the Council fleet," announced Communications Officer Maria Santos. "They are demanding immediate stop of hostile actions." "Tell them," Sullivan said calmly, "that this is not a hostile action. This is a conversation." High Arbiter Zexthal had called an emergency meeting aboard the Council flagship Eternal Judgment as the human projectiles approached, the ship's tactical officer, who was a crystalline being named Shard Singer, reported with obvious confusion. "The missiles carry no destructive payloads," Shard Singer announced through harmonic resonance. "Energy signatures indicate information storage devices." A final plea for mercy dismissed War Chief Korath, who was the reptilian commander of the Council's enforcement fleet. "Their species seeks to bargain with words when their weapons have failed them." But as the first wave of human missiles reached the alien fleet, something unprecedented occurred. Instead of being destroyed by the Council's defensive systems, the missiles activated proximity broadcasters and began transmitting on every frequency imaginable. Dr. Kevin Foster had worked for 3 sleepless days with the history department of every major university on Earth to compile what became known as the Human Archive. As the missiles transmitted their contents to the alien fleet, the Galaxy Council received a complete record of human civilization, including every war, and every peace treaty, and every act of heroism and villainy, and every triumph of art and science. "They are showing us everything," reported the Council's xenoanalyst, who was a floating organism designated Observer Prime. "Not just their conflicts, but their responses to conflict. Their growth, and their learning, and their capacity for change." The alien ships had expected to easily destroy any human attack, but the missiles were not designed to cause damage. They were designed to get close enough to broadcast their contents directly into the Council's communication systems. Each missile contained terabytes of compressed data about human history and culture and philosophy. The second wave of missiles carried something even more compelling, which was real-time communications from human communities across the solar system. The aliens listened to children singing in Martian schools and watched families reuniting after the asteroid mining seasons and observed former enemies working together on Luna-based construction projects. Captain Tony Hughes, commanding the defense satellite network around Jupiter, transmitted directly to the Council fleet saying, "You see our wars, but do you see what comes after? You see our violence, but do you see our choice to be better?" War Chief Korath had been expecting a conventional attack with nuclear weapons or kinetic bombardment or some form of destructive force that his ships could easily repel. Instead, his tactical systems were being flooded with data about human art and literature and music and scientific discoveries. "What is the tactical purpose of transmitting musical compositions?" he demanded of his intelligence staff. "How does showing us their poetry serve as a weapon?" Observer Prime had been analyzing the human data streams and was beginning to understand something that disturbed the ancient alien. "War Chief, this is not a weapon in any sense we understand. This is an attempt at communication." "They are trying to show us who they are?" High Arbiter Zexthal reviewed the incoming data with growing confusion. The human transmissions showed species-wide cooperation during natural disasters and the gradual elimination of slavery and the development of international law and the eventual abandonment of wars of conquest in favor of exploration and scientific advancement. These records show a species in transition, observed Council scientist Flux Weaver, who was one of the few species that had voted against the human ultimatum. Their violent tendencies appear to be decreasing over time rather than increasing. The third wave of human missiles carried personal messages from individuals across human space. Teachers and doctors and engineers and artists spoke directly to the alien fleet about their hopes for the future and their commitment to peace and their willingness to share knowledge with other species. Commander Mitchell watched her instruments. As more human ships launched additional missile waves, "They are not trying to penetrate our defenses," she reported to Earth Command. "The missiles are designed to be intercepted. They want the aliens to capture the data." Dr. Hayes had insisted on including what she called the progression principle in the human transmissions. The data was organized to show how humanity had evolved, from tribal warfare to city-states to nations to a unified planetary government. Each stage showed less violence and more cooperation than the previous one. "Look at their timeline," she had argued during the preparation phase. "Yes, we had wars, but count the years of peace. Measure the trend line. We are not the same species we were 1,000 years ago, or even 100 years ago." The Galaxy Council's communication systems were being overwhelmed by the sheer volume of human data. Every ship in the fleet was receiving detailed information about human culture and history and values. The aliens had never encountered a species that responded to threats by trying to educate their attackers. "They are not defending themselves," reported Shardsinger with something that might have been admiration. "They are teaching us." War Chief Korath was frustrated by his inability to categorize the human response. "This does not follow any known military doctrine. What is their objective? What do they hope to accomplish?" Observer Prime had been studying human conflict resolution techniques and was beginning to understand the alien nature of humanity's approach. "I believe they hope to accomplish understanding, War Chief. They want us to see them as they see themselves." The fourth wave of missiles carried something that shook the Council's confidence even more. These contained detailed records of how humans had dealt with their own tendency toward violence, including the establishment of international courts and peacekeeping forces and conflict resolution mechanisms. From Earth, President Collins transmitted a personal message to the Council saying, "You judge us for our past but ignore our trajectory. You see conflict and assume it defines us but miss the resolution that follows. Humanity does not wage war because we love violence. We wage war because we love something enough to fight for it. And what we fight for ultimately is the right to choose our own path toward peace." High Arbiter Zexthal had been part of 7 previous corrections during his tenure with the Galaxy Council. In each case, the primitive species had either surrendered immediately or launched futile attacks that were easily repelled. None had ever responded like humanity. "They are not trying to destroy us," observed Council scientist Flux Weaver, who was one of the few species that had voted against the human ultimatum. "They are trying to educate us." The human information barrage continued. For 6 hours, wave after wave of missiles delivered not weapons but knowledge. The aliens learned about the Renaissance and the Abolition movement and the Green Revolution and the global peace accords of 2089. They witnessed humanity's response to natural disasters and their care for endangered species and their eventual abandonment of fossil fuels in favor of sustainable technology. Dr. Hayes had insisted on including what she called the full context. The missiles transmitted records of human rights movements and scientific collaborations between former enemies, and the gradual reduction of warfare as humanity had spread to the stars. "Look at their timeline," she had argued during the frantic preparation phase. "Yes, we had wars, but count the years of peace. Measure the trend line. We are not the same species we were 1,000 years ago or even 100 years ago." War Chief Korath found himself studying human military history with growing bewilderment. The data showed that human weapons had become more precise over time rather than more destructive. Their strategies emphasized protection of civilian populations rather than their elimination. Most confusing of all, their military forces spent more time on disaster relief and peacekeeping than on actual combat. This makes no tactical sense, he complained to his staff. Why would a warrior species deliberately limit the destructive power of their weapons? Why would they create rules that make warfare more difficult for themselves? Observer Prime had been analyzing the human data for hours and was beginning to understand something profound. Because Warchief, they do not see warfare as their primary function. They see it as a necessary evil to be minimized and controlled. The Council's Xenoanalyst team was overwhelmed by the complexity of human civilization. Every other species they had encountered had followed predictable patterns of development. Aggressive species remained aggressive until they destroyed themselves or were destroyed by others. Peaceful species remained peaceful until they were conquered by more aggressive neighbors. Humans appear to be both aggressive and peaceful simultaneously, reported senior analyst Void Walker. They possess enormous capacity for violence, but have chosen to restrict its application. This contradicts our fundamental understanding of species development. High Arbiter Zexthal reviewed the data streams with increasing unease. The human transmissions showed detailed records of how Earth's nations had gradually moved from constant warfare to cooperative governance. The species had literally taught themselves to be less violent over time. Show me their current military capabilities, he ordered his intelligence staff. The analysis revealed something that challenged everything the Council believed about primitive species. Humanity possessed enough nuclear weapons to destroy their own planet several times over, but had chosen to reduce their arsenals rather than expand them. They had developed biological weapons, but had banned their use by international treaty. They had created artificial intelligence capable of autonomous warfare, but had deliberately programmed ethical constraints into every system. They could have destroyed themselves, observed Council Engineer Prime Node. Yet each time they pulled back from the brink. Each time they chose survival over conquest. From Earth, President Collins transmitted a personal message to the Council saying, "You judge us for our past, but ignore our trajectory. You see conflict and assume it defines us, but miss the resolution that follows. Humanity does not wage war because we love violence. We wage war because we love something enough to fight for it. And what we fight for ultimately is the right to choose our own path toward peace." The fifth wave of human missiles carried something that shook the Council's understanding even further. These contained detailed records of human philosophy and ethics showing how the species had grappled with questions of right and wrong across thousands of years of development. War. Chief Korath read translations of human writings about just war theory and the ethics of violence and the moral obligations of powerful nations to protect weaker ones. They have rules for when violence is acceptable, he said with obvious confusion. They debate the morality of their own actions even during warfare. No species we have encountered has ever done this, admitted Observer Prime. Most species either embrace violence completely or reject it completely. Humans have created a framework for controlled application of force in service of ethical goals. The alien fleet had stopped advancing toward Earth and was now positioned at a neutral distance that suggested neither retreat nor attack. Internal communications between Council ships showed heated debates about how to proceed. Commander Sarah Mitchell monitored the situation from the UES Defiance and reported to Earth Command. The alien fleet appears to be in some kind of internal discussion. They have not moved closer to Earth, but they also have not withdrawn. Dr. Hayes was analyzing the return transmissions from the Council ships and was encouraged by what she found. They are asking each other questions, she told Admiral Sullivan. Questions about their own assumptions and methods. We have made them doubt their certainty about us. The sixth wave of missiles carried real-time communications from human settlements across the solar system showing former enemies working together on construction projects and scientific research. Mars colonists who came from nations that had once been at war were collaborating on terraforming projects. Asteroid miners from different Earth cultures were sharing resources and protecting each other in the dangerous environment of space. High Arbiter Zexthal called an emergency council session aboard his flagship. Representatives of all 17 species participated in the debate that followed. The human response is unprecedented, he announced to the assembled delegates. They have not surrendered and they have not attacked. Instead, they have attempted to change our understanding of their species through education. Council scientist Flux Weaver presented his analysis of the human data. Their civilization shows consistent progress toward less violent conflict resolution. Their wars have become smaller and less frequent over time. Their weapons have become more precise rather than more destructive. Most significantly, they have developed international institutions specifically designed to prevent warfare. War Chief Korath was forced to admit something that went against his deepest beliefs. Analysis indicates that human military development has consistently trended toward defensive rather than offensive capabilities. They could have destroyed themselves multiple times but chose restraint instead. Observer Prime delivered the conclusion. That would change galactic politics forever. The humans demonstrate controlled aggression in service of protective goals. They are not a threat to galactic peace. They are an example of how aggressive species can evolve beyond their violent origins. High Arbiter Zexthal faced a decision that no council leader had ever confronted. Every previous correction had followed established protocols, but humanity had broken those protocols by responding in a completely unexpected way. Prepare a transmission to Earth, he ordered. The Council must reconsider its position. The Galaxy Council's emergency session lasted 3 days. Aboard their flagship, representatives of 17 different species debated something that had never before been questioned, which was their own assumptions about primitive civilizations. Dr. Hayes received permission to transmit directly to the Council's xenoanalysis team. You have spent so long cataloging species that wage war you forgot to study species that choose peace, she explained. Humanity's violence is not a flaw in our programming. It is a tool we learn to control. War Chief Korath, who had commanded the sterilization of 4 previous species, found himself reviewing human military history with growing confusion. They could have destroyed themselves a dozen times over, he admitted to his fellow commanders. Yet each time they pulled back from the brink. Each time they chose survival over conquest. Observer Prime compiled a report that shook the Council's foundations, saying, Analysis indicates human military development has consistently trended toward defensive rather than offensive capabilities. Their weapons grow more precise, not more destructive. Their strategies emphasize protection of civilian populations rather than their elimination. Captain Danny Roberts, monitoring the situation from Houston, watched as something unprecedented occurred. The alien fleet began to withdraw from the system's edge, moving to a neutral distance that suggested neither retreat nor advance. High Arbiter Zexthal's transmission to Earth came on the 4th day, saying, The Galaxy Council acknowledges that our initial assessment was incomplete. Your species presents characteristics we have not previously encountered. You demonstrate controlled aggression in service of protective goals. Admiral Sullivan's response was measured but firm. We do not ask for your approval of our methods. High Arbiter, we ask for your recognition of our results. Humanity chose to respond to your threat not with violence but with understanding. We could have launched nuclear weapons. Instead, we launched libraries. The aliens' reply carried what? The translation matrix interpreted as something close to admiration. Indeed, the Council withdraws its ultimatum. However, we extend an invitation. Would humanity consider joining the Galaxy Council as a consulting member? It appears we have much to learn about alternatives to our current correction protocols. President Collins's response became legendary in the histories that followed. We accept your invitation, but not as students seeking your approval. We join as equals, offering our experience to a galaxy that has forgotten the difference between the capacity for war and the choice for peace. The negotiations that followed took place over several weeks with human and alien representatives meeting in neutral space aboard a specially constructed diplomatic station. Jake Morrison was chosen as humanity's lead negotiator due to his military experience and his role in developing Operation Odyssey. The first meeting was awkward as both sides tried to understand each other's perspective. The aliens had expected humanity to be grateful for the chance to join galactic civilization. Instead, humans insisted on maintaining their independence while offering to share their knowledge freely. "You speak of sharing knowledge," said Council diplomat Harmony Singer. "What knowledge could a primitive species offer to civilizations that are thousands of years older?" Morrison's reply was simple but profound: the knowledge of how to change. Your species have been the same for millennia. You have perfected your technologies and your societies and then stopped growing. Humanity is still learning how to be better than we were yesterday. The council representatives were forced to acknowledge an uncomfortable truth. In their long dominance of the galaxy, they had become rigid and predictable. Their solutions, too. Every problem followed the same patterns they had used for thousands of years. Dr. Hayes presented detailed analysis of human conflict resolution techniques to the assembled aliens. "When two human groups have a disagreement, we do not automatically choose the stronger group as the winner," she explained. "We look for solutions that address the underlying causes of the conflict." This concept was revolutionary to species that had maintained galactic order through superior force for countless generations. The idea that conflicts could be resolved through understanding rather than domination challenged their fundamental worldview. War Chief Korath was perhaps the most changed by the human revelation. "I have spent my entire career enforcing peace through strength," he admitted during one session. "I never considered that peace could be maintained through wisdom." The final agreement established humanity as a full member of the Galaxy Council, with a unique role as conflict resolution specialists. When the Council encountered aggressive species, instead of immediately demanding surrender, they would first attempt the human approach of education and understanding. Commander Sarah Mitchell was assigned to lead the first joint human-alien patrol fleet. Her ships worked alongside Council vessels to respond to conflicts throughout the galaxy, using negotiation and cultural exchange rather than threats and force. The results were remarkable. Species that had been locked in warfare for generations found peaceful solutions when human mediators helped them understand each other's perspectives. Trade relationships developed between former enemies. Scientific collaboration replaced military competition. 6 months after first contact, Ambassador Jake Morrison departed for the Council's central system aboard the newly constructed UES Diplomatic. His mission was to establish a permanent human embassy and to train alien diplomats in human conflict resolution techniques. "Remember," Admiral Sullivan told him before departure, "we are not trying to make them more like us. We are trying to help them become the best version of themselves." Morrison's first report from the Council's home system described a galaxy in transition. Ancient species were questioning assumptions they had held for millennia. New approaches to problem-solving were being developed. The rigid hierarchy that had maintained order through fear was slowly being replaced by cooperative networks based on mutual respect. Dr. Hayes compiled her final report on humanity's first contact. "We did not prove we were peaceful by surrendering our weapons," she wrote. "We proved we were peaceful by choosing not to use them when we could have. Sometimes the greatest strength is showing that you do not need to prove your strength." The Galaxy Council's first human representative had taught an ancient galactic civilization that sometimes the youngest species has the oldest wisdom about when not to fight. Earth had faced a threat with missiles filled not with explosives but with truth. Years later, when other species asked how humanity had avoided destruction and instead gained respect, the answer was always the same. They had shown the galaxy something it had forgotten in thousands of years of dominance. They had shown that true strength lies not in the ability to destroy, but in the wisdom to choose a better way. The galaxy would never be the same because one young species had dared to respond to overwhelming force, not with violence but with an invitation to understand. Humanity had sent their warning in missiles, but the warning was not a threat. It was a lesson about what it truly means to choose peace.